So if you were to take track 3 of Thrive, so here in one day, we've gone from the introductory lecture to what you would learn after 3 years and 20 hours of lectures and practice and all of that. And we're going to jump right from one end to the other. So if this feels like it's sort of a sudden stretch, yeah, we're really going fast, hard, and far. And I'm trying to put like bookends around a whole body of knowledge, most of which you haven't been exposed to yet. But maybe this will work. It worked pretty well with the Catholic Charities, so I'm thinking that it might have a chance of working here. So one of the things that's very, very practical, even if you don't understand all of the theory and neurology behind it, is to understand that, remember when I said that when the brain is peaceful and stable, when everything makes sense and fits together? So what ends up happening is there's some kind of a signal that your brain gives off at every one of these levels that says something ain't right here. And I'm going to call that signal that something ain't right here pain. Now that's a real stretch for what we normally mean by pain, because you'll say some of these, well, I wouldn't call that pain exactly, and I'd agree with you. But we don't have a word to call all kinds of signals that something isn't right. And if we can recognize the signal, so we say, oh, this signal is from this level of the brain saying something isn't right. Guess what happens? When we go back to figure out where should we start putting something right, we have a good idea where the problem is coming from. Like if, so the easiest one, the level 1 is your attachment center, right? And level 5 is your information center. So if you are getting a squeak from level 1, attachment, is it likely that more information is going to change that? Right, you got a mismatch. And if you need some information, like, you know, how much money do we have in the bank, and I give you some level information like, but I really love you, is that going to reduce the distress at, you know, that, no, thank you very much, I'm glad you love me, but how much do we have in the bank, right? I mean, these are really simple, but they're really still reflecting how do we actually figure out systematically now if we want to intervene in these different things. And what we're going to start with is the characteristic pain at level 1. And you should have this in your notes, and if you try to read it on the board, you'll have a hard time. Let's see if I can read it out for you, because I can actually read it on my screen right here. And these are ways to guess that I have pain at level 1. So I'll make one other observation here, and that is pain at level 1 is the hardest of all the levels to intervene. To intervene, right? So if my mother just died, my husband just left me, my, you know, whatever it is going on, you already know that it's going to be real hard to do something real quick. So like, oh, well, why don't we just invite Jesus? Well, that's, you know, it's a good idea, but will it make you feel better? Like, oh, well, we know that inviting Jesus doesn't make our husband just leaving suddenly feel better, right? That pain doesn't respond fast or well to anything else. And the other thing about it is, I want you to sort of understand that the entire brain is an amplifier. So it amplifies the signals that are coming in and figures out what's the biggest and most important part of it there. And what happens when I'm at level 1 pain is that's where the signal comes in. It turns the volume up too loud on everything. So, you know, after you've had a major loss, everything bothers you, right? You see a canary run into your window and it's like, oh, 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 and you cry. And, you know, it would normally bother you a little. Everyone doesn't like to see a canary run into the window, but now it seems like just who can, you know, deal with such an awful thing in the world. You know, the size, the feeling of everything in life is out of proportion to what it would normally be when you have pain at level 1. So the number one way of describing what happens when you have pain at level 1 is I feel alone. Now again, words have a hard time to actually do justice to this, right? So I remember after the day, the moment I found out that my mother had just died. So that's level 1 pain, right? Okay. I walked around the world. I happened to be in Mexico City and I had a really good case of dysentery and I was trying to get a flight home. If you ever had Mexico City dysentery, you know just how lovely this can be for travel. And everyone else is going on with their life, right? There's plenty of people around, so you can't really say I'm alone, but I feel extremely alone in this situation. Like no one else understands why. First of all, I don't want to tell them I've got the dysentery, and secondly, you know, I don't want to talk about that my mom just passed, and no one seems to care, and you know, they're more interested in whether they get, you know, next on the flight or whatever else. You see all those things? Normally they'd be there, it'd be a little annoying, but all of a sudden today it's huge. And I'm, you know, only I alone understand like this. I remember thinking to myself, there's been a big loss. Shouldn't the world just stop? Okay, some of you have been there too. It's like, life should just simply not go on as usual. Something here big has happened. And that's the feeling of being alone. So you see, being alone doesn't really do that justice, does it? But it's kind of the better word we have for it right there. And what resolves the pain is the one that we love being with us. Now sometimes that's easy to do, right? I feel alone. The one that I'm with, you know, I haven't seen my wife now in about 2 weeks. Wednesday night, I anticipate that'll resolve, right? Right now I miss her, can't do anything about it now, but even my mind can say, oh yeah, it's only a couple more days, and then I'll be back, right? So that's the resolvable ones. Other times, like when my mother passed away, the resolve didn't look like it was anywhere around. And it wouldn't work for somebody else to go and say, well, you know what? I know a lot of really nice mothers in the world. Why don't I just give you this one? Like, well, that's very nice, but my brain allows no substitutions at level 1. So if you lost your hamster and someone brings you another very nice hamster, it still isn't my hamster. You ever run into that story, right? Because level 1 says this wasn't the one. And as nice as you are, wonderful mother as you are, you're not the one. So it won't resolve the pain. But it resolves, if you can, with the one that you love. Now the number one's the symptom that you normally get if this pain is going on and you're not aware that it's there, because remember it's subcortical, so it can happen without you knowing that it's there. Not without it affecting you. But the most common symptom of that it's there and running and you haven't noticed it yet is cravings. And that craving is that feeling, I need something, I need something, I need something, I'm not sure what it is. And maybe it's chocolate, and so I'll eat some chocolate, and had it actually been chocolate, once we'd had a bite of chocolate, we go, wow, I feel so good. But no, it's like, maybe it's a bar of chocolate, maybe it's 2 bars, maybe it's 7 bars, maybe it's, you know, or cravings can be all sorts of things, right? But what we realize is that we're looking for something that we need. We can't find the thing that we need. It's almost always attachment. It's almost always we need the one we love, and we can't figure out how to. Now, sometimes they're just the next room, but we can't figure out how we could walk in there and get the kind of joyful reaction we want. So their being in the next room does us no good. So let's go buy shoes. Because at least then, you know, the clerk will be glad to see me, and if I walk in the next room, they will not be glad to see me. But I've never walked into a shoe store, but what they said, oh, what can I do for you tonight? Right? I mean, actually, that's how these things work. Addictions, then, grow out of attachment pain, almost always. We're looking for something. And only when if it's an addiction, you got to keep getting it and getting it and getting it and getting it, because one dose won't do you. Whereas one dose of the person you love would do it for you, right? And so, again, sexual addictions, they all fit this kind of thing. It's a form of craving. Our defenses to it are to cling or to dismiss somebody. So if I'm feeling attachment pain, one way I can protect myself from it is make sure I don't get close to you. Because if I warm up to you, then I'll feel that need more. And so I'll just stay away, and I'll find other ways, things that keep me away from you, and then I won't have to feel like I need you anymore. Or I can cling on to you and say, when I can't let you go, you need to give me your full attention, you know, you need to, my life needs to be, your life needs to be all about me in some form or another, because then I'll never have to face this pain again. Both of those, which we call, you know, the attachment styles, you know, the dismissive attachment style, like I never notice I need you or have any feelings for you, and the clinging attachment style that's often called distracted attachment. I'm always distracted by my own feelings and needs. Are ways of coping with sort of this chronic attachment pain style. Now, one other thing we might want to know, I haven't really talked about apoptosis so far in this process, but if we go back to Dr. Shore's lecture, at about 4 years of age and at about 12 years of age, your brain goes through and cleans the garage. Downsizes. Says, I'm going to go through, and everything that I haven't used, I'm going to dump. So there's just too many options out here, too many things running. If I'm ever going to get good at anything, I'm going to cut out, and it's got 3 different ways of cutting out systems in the brain that didn't get used. So the worst of them being this apoptosis, in which case I'm actually going to kill off the whole brain cell. Other ways there's other ways of deadening it. But here's why we're going with this. At 12 years of age, if I've been getting this attachment pain signal and no one seems to care, I will cut off my connections from my conscious mind to my attachment pain signal. Like that line has got to go. And from that point on, I will honestly and truly tell you, I'm fine. Nothing bothers me. I don't miss them. I don't, no. That's, why are people all upset? What's the big deal? I've got no signal. And it isn't that the signal isn't on. If you can tap deep enough in the brain, you'll see the signal is still on. They're still feeling attachment pain. So it will be driving addictions. But consciously, they have no signal, because the line got cut at 12 years of age, that tells them, in fact, that they're missing people. They will totally and completely honestly tell you, no, I'm not feeling anything. I'm not missing anything. It's got nothing to do with you. Because no conscious signal exists that's there. It was there up until age 12. But at age 12, because the signal never got listened, the brain just goes, we got to cut that line. It's just on all the time. It's useless.
Cutting it between attachment and what?
And the conscious mind. So you no longer have your direct access to your attachment signal. Yes?
But like relational object constancy, they don't have that constant knowing that somebody's with them when you're away from them, or no?
Well, it's very closely related to the object constancy, but what object constancy does not mean that they're always there. What it means is that I can rely on them caring if I send them a signal that I want them. I know they would care to respond. Not that they'll always be able to, but I can count on it. I remember one person saying, you know, if my good friends were here, they would care about what's happening right now. So they've got object constancy. They know someone would care if they were here. They're not here and they're not available. And I remember in one case, the friends had actually died. But the person still had that steady, the signal that said, yeah. And they knew they needed their friends. This cuts the signal that says I even need anybody. No, I don't need anybody. At age 12 is when it cuts.
At age 4, you were saying?
Well, there's another trim out at age 4. It just doesn't cut that line.
Doesn't cut that.
Yeah. The things that tend to get trimmed out at age 4 are the things that build either the joy or the serotonin system. So you know serotonin is what quiets you. The reason people get depressed and are given serotonin medications isn't that you're sad, it's that you can't quiet yourself. So if you haven't been using your serotonin systems for the first 4 years, your brain goes through and goes, they're cluttering up the garage, clearing them out. And then later on in your life, when you could use some serotonin because things are going wrong, the systems all got thrown away when you were 4. And furthermore, if they're weakened at age 4, when you get to age 12, the brain will actually kill off 4 times as many of your serotonin systems as it would have normally. So there's a multiplication factor that happens at age 12. So the kids that can't quiet themselves and are agitated and causing trouble prior to age 12 are 4 times more at risk of adolescence being out of control than the average person if you haven't taught them by age 12 to build some joy and quiet themselves. So there's some crucial times, but all of that's not what we're talking about here. Here we're just talking about, do you actually know that you're missing people? And the people we talk about as dismissive, they're not lying when they say, no, I don't feel anything, I'm not bothered, I don't get it, why are you upset, why you keep, why you keep clinging on to me, why, no, I don't feel any of that. It's not like they're covering up or making up a story. They actually have no signal left that tells them. But because the mechanism is still running deep in their brain, they still have all the cravings. That's an indirect message. So they'll be involved in all of the addictions and cravings and stuff like that. And you say to them, well, you got that craving because you actually want to be attached with people. And they'll honestly tell you, no, it's got nothing to do with people. I don't think about people, I don't ask for people, I don't know. It's got nothing to do with the need to be connected or loved, I just, because they don't have that information. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not denial, it's lack of signal. But we can be absolutely certain that the signal is still running deep down inside. The need is still there. It's just now their brain has no idea. And so it's much more difficult to build something around that unless you, again, go to the group identity and say, well, but even whether you feel that or not, that's not how our people act. When we need, here's what we do. That system is still available to intervene and say, our people don't do these things. We do these things. Whether or not you feel that or not doesn't really matter at all to whether we do it. We are not doing the stuff you're doing with your addiction because that's not how we operate. So what I'm saying is that just because they have no signal doesn't mean that we've run out of options. Is that clear? It doesn't mean, of course, it's going to be a simple one fix, but we have options still. So otherwise we all drop into hopeless despair and go, well, what's a person to do then? They cut the phone line.
Would that be the scenario of a sociopath?
It's one of the ways to produce a sociopathic behavior, yes. That lack of signal makes it easier, but actually sociopaths probably have turned off more pathways than that. Yeah. So it's probably a component, but not enough. So, and the reason that we know that that's not the main component is most sociopaths use attachment pain to control their victims. So if I can get you to attach to me, I can get you to do whatever I want, and every time you don't, I'll threaten you with an attachment pain. Someone who has no attachment signal won't be able to pull that off, right? Because they won't be able to predict accurately, like I'll cause them pain. Actually, the most severe pain you know how to feel every time you try to cross me or pull away from me or not do what I want. So sociopaths have some of this signal at least left, or they wouldn't be a good sociopath. So the diagnostic indicators then is I overestimate or underestimate the importance of feelings and relationships. So if you're looking at somebody who is either significantly too highly invested in feelings, like feelings are the biggest things in the world, or they have a numb spot when it comes to feelings, like I don't feel those. Either one of those things, you know, either too high or too low, is likely to be an adaptation to chronic attachment pain. Now, if somebody is normally in the right spot and now they're just up a little too high or way down too low, they've probably suddenly entered into attachment pain. So one of the things that happened, one of our counselors once had been completely a great counselor, and then his father died. And the calculator went off. So the thing on which he was making all of his clinical judgments, how big a deal is this, how small a deal, was now being significantly skewed by the fact that he had attachment pain turning his amplifier up way too high. He began to make value judgment mistakes consistently and not be able to see that he was off, because it really did feel that big. And every time before, it's another thing about counselors, you don't really make a good counselor or pastor unless you trust your judgment better than other people. Right, because when it comes down to a judgment call, who's right or wrong, I got to trust my judgment over most of the people that come to see me. Otherwise, everyone that comes in to see me, we run a different way, and they'll just move me all around. So typically, your average pastor or counselor trusts their own judgment above anybody else around their vicinity, which, with no safeguards, is not a safe operating method. But especially not safe if you suddenly encounter attachment pain. Now suddenly your main way of measuring how big and small everything else is off. So I told, my dad came to live with us when he was 90 and he lived with us for 10 years. So I said, someday, my point is my dad's going to pass away. When my dad passes away, I told my board of directors, do not ask me to make any important decisions for the next year. I don't know where my judgment is going to be, but I do have a good chance of having my judgment be off. So you don't want me making major decisions after 10 years of taking care of my dad, and I don't know which way my needle is going to go. So for that next year, you guys better be ready to make all of the judgment calls. You can talk to me about it if you want, but don't leave it up to me. See? Because I already know I've got a good chance that my attachment pain is going to skew my judgment in ways that I can't predict or measure. And that's a real bad time to be in charge, right? So I need to distrust my own judgment at some time, and I need to know that ahead of time, because if I try to decide it at the time, my judgment is already off, and I will probably decide I should probably trust my judgment better than yours anyway, which is typically what happens. And so you get people in attachment pain often making very bad judgments who've previously been doing okay for how they're going to run their churches, their counseling, the responsibilities under them. Yes?
If you identify this in someone else, you said that you could intervene and that there are options. Are you going to get into that a little more, what those options are?
Probably not going to get into the options, because What you need to do to intervene in people's attachment systems is, without question, the most delicate and difficult of all topics to discuss that we could possibly get into. And so in a 2-day seminar, I'm only going to say that it's not impossible, but I'm also not going to suggest, here's you go about, making changes at that level. What I can tell you, though, which might be helpful, I hope it is, and that is, you never make a mistake if you are able to invite Jesus into that and let Jesus encounter them in the middle of that attachment pain. That'll never go wrong for you. The only could possibly go wrong is a few people bring in their Sunday school Jesus, the one they imagine and make up. And if you bring in your own Sunday school Jesus, the results are completely unpredictable, except that they won't last. That's predictable. But if you actually experience the presence of Jesus, it's actually, and he doesn't always, but it's actually one of the ways in which attachment pain can be resolved. And I'll try to describe it this way. Everybody's love has a different flavor. So love from my mother and my father and my brother and my wife, none of them has the same flavor to it. And when my attachment center is looking for love, it's looking for it in exactly the flavor that you would give it to me. But the thing that gives it different flavors, let's say, just for the fun of it, that there are 1,000 elements in love. And my mom happens to have elements 3, 17, 24, whatever her combination are, in different amounts of them, right? All 1,000 elements come from the character of God and God's love. And God can give me love in the exact same flavor that filtered through my mother, father, brother, whoever else, so that I can't tell the difference between that love and the one I'm looking for. Right? And he does that routinely, which is why a number of times I find Christians and people who receive love from God don't grieve in the way that other people do, because they actually experience that, that love coming through them. It was very interesting. After my mother died, within a matter of days, I felt closer to her than I did before she died. In fact, closer to her than I had her entire life. My mother had an extremely damaged brain. She had all water on the right side of her head. No brain there at all. All filled with water. And a decent trauma history and all these sorts of things. And she could never understand me. But I felt, for whatever reason, within days of her having passed, that she could now see me. And it was like all of that interference was out of the way. So I felt like, oh, now she loves me, because she can see me. You see, that came through God, right? And that path is always available. So I recommend it to everybody. But any other ways of kind of mucking with the system, at least for right now, we're going to say there are mechanisms, there are other things, but we'll leave that to wise and experienced people. And I'm not saying you're not, but I'm just saying that in a 2-day seminar, it would get way too complex for us to get very helpful on that one right there. So, is that okay? All right. Thank you for your graciousness. So, we're looking basically for people then, the main sign we're going to look for is that things seem to be out of proportion. It's either too big a deal or too small a deal. Both cases, what's probably got the amplifier set wrong is there's attachment pain underneath. And usually you're filling in with cravings along the way. That's what you think you want, is potato chips. But 10,000 bags of potato chips hasn't actually made you any less craving potato chips. I picked that because that's safe for me. I couldn't care less about potato chips. But some people do, right? So I'm not trying to make fun of that right there. So it's not resolved by communication at all. There's no information I can give you that's going to make this better. All I can do is get you in touch with some true source of love, and possibly I can help you recognize that the source of love you're looking for is still alive and available, and we've just got to get some things out of the way so that you can start experiencing that love again. And this is where it gets very, very tricky, because if the volume is turned up too loud, I'm going to expect too much from that source of love for what they're actually going to be able to provide. And if it's turned down too low, I'm going to expect too little for what I actually need. And that's again where you have to surround the person with a community and go like, it's not just one source of love in your life. We need to help you discover who you are and all these other sources and get this one balanced back again. So if there's one area in which I say, if you want to mess with this, being around, going to talk to a counselor to look into this area of life, this is the area in which I'd be most likely to suggest people do that. But you need to work with a counselor who understands the importance of joy and attachment and love in your life, because just because someone's a counselor doesn't mean they're going to be the slightest bit helpful over here. It isn't a license that helps you do this. It's your ability to love people that lets you do this. And of course that's connected with how well you understand what God's doing and lets you rebuild the community around people. So, let's see, some tests for different levels of pain and synchronization. So what would be a test that I use reliably for this one? So any people do marital counseling? All right, got some people do marital counseling. The most reliable first indicator that I have that we've got attachment pain running is that the couple doesn't share a sense of reality. What one reports things are, the other one doesn't report the same thing. So every time you get into a discussion with them, it's like what you think happened and what you think happened aren't on the same page. Whenever I run into that, that's almost always traces back to one of you's got attachment pain, maybe probably both of you. Because what generally happens is if you start getting those collisions where we don't match reality, one of them starts turning down their attachment signal and the other one starts turning it up. And now you're going to have for sure increasingly divergent view of reality of what's going on. And exchanging information will do you no good when people don't have shared reality. So I think some of you could intuitively go, I think I've seen that beast before. So that's level 1 pain. Did we just go to level 2 pain on the screen? Oh, wow. Yes.
Would it be possible for us to have pages 7 and 8, because we can't read it there, we can't read it here, but I really want to go home with that information. Is it in one of your books, or can we get larger copies of these particular slides?
I was able to find it online.
Yeah, it's online.
Okay, very good.
I searched it and it has a compile chart and it has each individual.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks to Uncle Google. It has been found. Okay, characteristics of pain at level 2. Okay, so we call it pain and also disorganization, because pain is again kind of maybe not the right word for it, but we're looking at what happens when synchronization is breaking down at this level. What does the discomfort look like? And the way you feel, one of the main things is I feel disconnected. So it's a little bit different than alone, because now the emphasis is starting to shift to, I'm looking for someone to help me with this, and there isn't anybody. That's what I mean by disconnected. So whatever it might be, I don't have somebody in the, and this, I don't necessarily need it to be somebody that I love deeply and they're the only ones that can do it. So someone broke into our house at in the middle of the night, and I called the cops. And I didn't need a cop to show up that deeply loved me and understood me and wanted to share his life with me. I needed someone to be there who understood that I didn't like the break-in and was going to do something about it. And until they showed up, I had this disconnected feeling, like, where are they? What's going on? So this is the difference again, feeling disconnected, what I mean, and feeling I don't have the one I loved, right? So this you know, again, we're hard to do with words, and the pain resolves with quieting. So the cop showed up and he goes, wow, there's some big guy broke down your door. That didn't help. And then he said, yeah, he's probably gone by now, nothing we can do about it. Tell you what, in the morning, why don't you go ahead and get your door fixed? That didn't help me quiet either, right? It's like, okay, so you said already, this is some big guy that broke down my door. And you know, you can't do anything about it, and that leaves me sort of disconnected here. You know, I'm like, I'm hanging, and fix it in the morning. You know, there's a gap in there. Like, why don't you just go to bed and fix it in the morning? Yeah, easy for you to say. So he actually could tell, this is going up to level 3, that I was not quieting. So he looked at me, he says, well, we'll put on some extra patrols tonight. Now, when he said it, I knew good and well he was lying. There was no way he was putting on extra patrols. But I quieted. Not because he was lying for me, but because he recognized, this is a funny thing, watching your brain do this thing. He recognized how freaked out I was and that this wasn't a good thing and that I needed something. So he promised me something they weren't ever going to do. And I knew they weren't ever going to do it, but I knew that he understood exactly how freaked out I was about the door. It's funny that connection let this part of my brain quiet down and go like, oh, all right, he gets it.
That's a little mutual mind.
Yeah, that's why level 3 happened. That was a mutual mind thing he did on me, and my mutual mind told me he was lying through his teeth, but he was understanding me. I still felt better. That was a funny thing to watch my fear levels go down. This guy gets it. He's lying to me. But what happened then, of course, is it activated my relational circuits. I started to find creative ways to deal with it because now I'm out of freak out, which is, again, nothing to do with this right here. But the symptom is that I have stopped listening to other people. So, you know, when he was telling me these things, I'm not connecting with him at all. It's like, okay, that's good, fix it in the morning. Your mouth is talking, I am not connected with you at all. All I want to do is make it stop. I feel vulnerable, make it stop. And that's the other thing we're looking at, is the defense. So one of the other things that happens to me when I was doing more counseling, people would frequently come in and say, I'm going to kill myself. Now, I want to kill myself is a message that just says, I want to make it stop. Right? And unless I was able to connect with them in a way that made them understand how much they wanted to make it stop, they kept broadcasting to me, I'm going to make it stop, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to kill myself. So I had to say to them in some way, again, going up to level 3, I have to get them out of level 2 into level 3. This message, I'm going to make it stop, I'm going to make it stop, I'm going to make it stop, means level 2 is on, broadcasting as loud as it can go, nobody else upstairs is home. But what you need then, the skill you need to deal with this is some kind of self-quieting. And clearly what's blown out on this particular moment, whether it was me in the broken door, is my self-quieting is simply not working right now. My built-in capacity for handling break-ins in the middle of the night is been exceeded. I've got a lack of acting like myself options available here, and there's no one I really want to turn to. Do I want to go tell my kids how freaked out I am? Nope, not a resource. Do I want to tell my wife how freaked out I am? No, she's, I think, worse than I am. So where I have no resources, right? So all I want to do is make it stop. There's no one I want to turn to in that, and I'm not quieting myself effectively. Now, if I was better at this sort of thing, which I don't want to be, but if I was, I would have immediately begun to think of, oh, you know, when I get broken in the middle of the night, here are the resources I like to have, here's how I quiet myself, here's what I do for myself, here's all my options, you know. They would have flooded in, but I didn't have any. I drew a blank card, right? So I wasn't quieting myself. Diagnostic indicators, the bad thing that scares me has my attention. So I'm so focused on the door and the break-in, I really can't think of anything else. It's taken over my mind and focus. That's all I'm looking at right now. I've forgotten every tool I own that's in the garage, how much wood might be out there, all the different ways you could actually block a door in the middle of it. None of that is in, there's a big guy out there, and he broke the door. Took over the scanner. Or the other thing is I withdraw from others, and I just curl on up. I just withdraw, I stop responding. You know, I'm just like, you know, your fetal position, not responsive person. It's like I shut down. So the other way I go. You know, you don't see that as often. Typically what you see is the over focus on the scary thing or the upsetting thing. But every once in a while you find somebody just shuts down and they can't think about it. Now the interesting thing is that's also an automatic mechanism. So most of the time when people have, like they say, I don't have memories of this or that or the other thing that happened, what ends up being the reality is every time they try to load it in, it shuts down their brain. It overwhelms them, so they just go into the shutdown phase. So they say they don't remember it, but the problem actually isn't that they don't remember it, it's that they can't keep their brain on when they do remember it. So it just shuts them down into non-functional mode. And so you have to build enough capacity in relationship to keep your brain on long enough to actually say, now I can remember what's going on. So these blank spots in memories can reflect something that's way too intense to load in if I'm going to have to deal with this myself. So that's why I withdraw, you know, I just disconnect from others and even my own mind. And again, this is not resolved by communication at all. So if you tell somebody, well, you know, don't be frightened of guys that break open your door, or don't be frightened of heights, or don't be frightened of elevators, or don't be frightened of airplanes, or don't be frightened of what, it does absolutely not the slightest good. I mean, it isn't that they don't understand the words, right? It's just that that isn't going to hit it. That's not going to cut what's going on down here. So what you tend to have for other tests is that it's they stop interacting and relating to others as a source of a solution to problems. Their world becomes fear-driven. And time and sequence don't matter, another way of saying it. It's like you're now in a state that's going to go on forever, which is exactly how I was with the break-in. It's like, I'm in an eternal broken-in state. I'm vulnerable for as long as I can possibly think in the future. This will never go away. It's not like, oh, it was really dangerous for a while, and then this guy ran off down the street as fast as he could go, so the danger's already diminishing greatly. You know, I mean, all of those things that had I been tracking real-time experience would have been part of the overall experience, and say, like, you know, here's what's happening, here's the flow, my feelings are reflecting that. No, they're locked on. They're not changing, they're not updating in real time to match what's going on around me. So my wife, who developed a fear of flying, you know, when we hit turbulence, it's like she goes into this other state, and it's like, oh, I think we're over the turbulence. Would you stop crushing my hand, please? You know, because it makes no difference at all what I tell her or explain to her, or that in fact this kind of turbulence hasn't made the wings fall off of a single aircraft yet. You know, the probabilities of getting hit by a meteorite at this point are higher than the ones of the, you know, you want to waste your time, right? So they've stopped interacting. You see, she's no longer tracking me. What I'm saying is of no consequence to her at all, because she's in this frozen frozen time state that's not updating. So that's another way of recognizing we're in level 2 pain. You can see it's a little bit like the volume is turned up too loud, but rather than the volume being up too loud for everything that's happening to you, you're now locked into one thing and nothing else is happening to you. So you see the difference here between 1 and 2? All right, let's move on to level 3. Now we'll work with this more tomorrow. Level 3 pain, have we got it up there? All right, good to know. Way to describe that is I feel overwhelmed. And by the way, one of the things that Scripture doesn't mean when it says I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me is not that I'll never feel overwhelmed. If you want to read through the Psalms, when my heart is overwhelmed, it talks about all of that. Paul talks about being overwhelmed on his missionary trip, that he felt like a sentence of death had been passed against him. They weren't going to live to get out of this. He was overwhelmed by what was going on. So there's nothing about being Christian or having faith that pulls you out of getting into overwhelmed situations. But what you find with David and with Paul and others is that particularly with the help of their fellowship, they turn back to God for help during times of overwhelm. You see, we're always going to be so small that something in life will be capable of overwhelming us. That's going to be life for sure. But that doesn't mean we've been abandoned or that we're alone or that God won't be with us when we're overwhelmed and that he won't somehow be able to guide us through that even if our brain is on the fritz. And I couldn't mean that more sincerely. It's not up to you to be able to process everything well enough to make sure that God can do his work. God's pretty well aware that you can go on the fritz sometimes and that he's still got you in his hand. As a question not of how well you can follow him, but how well he holds on to you. That's going to actually determine the outcome of much of what we're going through. So pain is resolved with mirroring. So going back to the police, and as you just identified Jim, when the police officer was able to mirror back to me how scared I was, it resolved this issue. I'm not alone. He gets it. He knows that I'm a scared homeowner, and I'm going to need something to help me with being scared. Lame solution he came up with, but nonetheless, we had this connection right here. I'm going to typically be stuck in one of the big 6 negative emotions. So you remember what they were from Marcus's talk or other sources? Sadness, anger, fear, disgust, hopeless despair, shame. So now all of a sudden we're in the world of emotions for the first time on the levels of the brain. You notice that this attachment pain, although we feel it very intensely, we don't really call that an emotion. And this, even this terror of level 2, it's not exactly an emotion, it's a reaction, but we tend to call it a reaction. So when we're up here, now we're actually talking about the world that's generally called emotions. Yes?
So when someone presents with more somatic symptoms, they can't really with anxiety, there's overwhelm, anxiety, would you say it's going lower on the scale, it's more attachment, more...
So the somatic symptoms going lower down. Yes, there's a good chance that you're headed more towards attachment pain that's going on, but you also have people who have not been taught in any way to identify and articulate and share in a relational, shall I say, space, these 6 emotions. So they're existing, they're feeling them, but they don't know how to talk about any of it. So this is all learned. So you have to learn that this is what I'm feeling, and this is how you talk about it. Just like babies have to learn that they're hungry and that you ask for something to eat when you're hungry, which they don't know to begin with. They just reply with distress. So So yes, it's likely to be lower, but I would check and make sure that you can talk about these 6 feelings well in a relational way before I would dismiss them as the cause of your troubles. And I find that a lot of people are going to have trouble talking about these 6 feelings. The defense is try to make other people understand you. So sometimes you'll find people who are really, really, really driven. They're trying to get you to understand them. And what it really gets bad is when 2 of us are doing it at the same time. We both have the transmit button jammed down, and we're going, you know, if you understood me, you'd stop trying to make me try to understand you. So if you understand me first, and we're not getting into that mutual mind state, because neither one of us is stable enough to stay there and listen to you before you listen to me. So since no one can go first, you know, we're trying to, you know, like, well, if you just need to understand that what you're doing is bloop, 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 bloop. We're not getting level 3 uncrammed right there. Well, the skill that's needed is mind sight, the ability to really understand. Mind sight is basically experienced mutual mind. So if I've developed enough mutual mind experience so that I've got a range of ways of understanding what you're thinking, and they're pretty accurate, we call that mind sight, because now I can look at you, I can look at a whole wide range of interactions and go like, oh, I know what that means and know what's going on there. It's interesting to me how very many people who came in for counseling to me would say to me, oh, you were mad at me today, what did I do? And I think it's so close to 100% of the time that was the day I was tired, that I don't think there was ever a time that they actually were ever right. I wasn't mad at them, but what they were looking at, they were picking up some reaction. So we had some kind of mutual mind going, you know, they know I'm feeling something, but they misread it. And they're, you know, they looked at them, it's like, well, if someone isn't responding to me the way I want to, what's probably going on in there? Ah, well, I pulled out the I'm mad at me card, because that's what keeps people from interacting with me. It's like they're mad at me. So I can see your responses are kind of dull. You must be. Yeah. And also very often people would get the level of my feelings, you know. Like, you know, I'd say, well, I'm a little annoyed by this, you know, this is the 3rd week you haven't paid your bill. And they would go like, you're furious at me, you're so upset, I don't know. Like, well, no, not really. I'm furious or upset. I know how to be furious and upset. It's not like I don't know how, but that's not where I'm at. But their mind sight was, you know, there was no gradient on this. You know, you went from being fine to, you know, now I think you want to kill me. That was the only, so you got mind sight that's off. And what you've probably experienced this with people. You've never done it yourself, I'm fairly certain, but you've experienced with other people where they misunderstood you, they misread you, they misread your motives, they misread your intentions, you misread your reactions to something they were doing. If they had an attachment with you and they had fairly decent mind sight, you could correct it. You go like, oh, no, that wasn't quite it. Oh, phew, that's good. I'm glad I got your picture clearly now. But if mind sight isn't very well developed, then they jam and they go like, oh, no, I'm sure. You know, this is what's going on. Now, if I'm still trying to get other people to understand me, and I just keep doing that, then my brain has now gotten stuck. The elevator got up to the 3rd floor, and it won't go up. So, and again, you probably have people come to your mind that pretty much anytime you talk to them, they're just trying to get you to understand them. Their elevator just seems to never go above the 3rd floor. They don't even have to be particularly upset. Or maybe they're sort of chronically seem like they're sort of upset, but they live at the 3rd floor. They have no idea there's a 4th floor on this building at all. And it's not resolved by communication alone. So here's the thing, you can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, but talking about it by itself doesn't change the problem next time you come around. It's still just as bad as it was before. It needs feelings to be shared too, so it's almost more my voice tone and the way I look at you that's going to resolve this than what I'm actually going to say about it. Now, if I say the wrong thing, it'll get in my way. But if I say even the right things, but without the right feeling with it, it won't help me unjam this particular thing. So again, looking at that, you know how much counseling and counseling techniques are developing this skill right here. How do I sit across from somebody and fairly accurately read what's going on with them? So who asked me the somatic question? Over there, yeah. So I had one client, when she would come in, within 3 minutes of her coming to the room, I had such bad intestinal gas that I was trying to spend my entire hour trying to not pass gas. It's very distracting. And it happened reliably every time she came in. So I really didn't know how to express that to you, like, you know, my dear, you give me gas every time you come in. I got to run out within 3 minutes of your coming in. I got to go to the bathroom because you don't want to hear what I'm going to do. The problems of counselors. What's going on there? Yes, yes. I was actually entering fairly effectively into a level 3 state with her, to the point where I was starting to duplicate what was going on inside of her. So when we got to the point of how upsetting her whole system was that she could not put into words, I find that my body was putting into feelings the things that she could not put into words. And when we finally got around to how does it feel to be that upset inside and not be able to let it out, and this pressure building, and you don't know how to connect with other people, you don't want anybody. When I put that into words, she was like, "You understand me." I didn't tell her how I knew, but I knew. Now, the funny thing in terms of somatization is that when we had this really good understanding about how it felt, I was putting into words these physical symptoms, and she was, God knows what was going on with her. But not only did I stop doing that, getting that reaction, but her being began to put in things into feeling words that she couldn't do before. And every time I would find it starting to build again, because it didn't, like immediately stop because we had one conversation, right? It became part of my understanding what was going on with her that I could talk about very quickly. I said, "Oh, I feel the gas building up. Oh, Lordy." And I knew which way to go. You see, there's these odd things that I told you before, there's these different value systems in your body and mind that are working together, and they're not always convenient. But we're often trying to figure out a way to put this into words. So this.
What book is that?
What book? I have not put that into print anywhere that I know of, but I will give you a brief Bible study. And I'm trying to remember now which one of the prophets. It's one of the major prophets. But if translated literally, it says, God pushes and groans and brings forth life. Men push and groan and they bring forth a fart. And it follows, our righteousness is like filthy rags and all that sort of stuff. But it's a very, the translation does not do it justice. It's, but even our gas tells us something about how much we're able to actually bring forth the life that God wants us to do. It's like, it's kind of futile for you to do what I want to do. But I digress into Bible study. So, This is not resolved by communication in the sense that if I just talk about it, it'll make it better. I have to somehow share your experience with you well enough and communicate it at different levels that you can actually experience that I'm sharing this experience with you, and I'm helping you to see, in this point, how would my people handle this in a relational way? What's going on inside me is not something that prohibits us from having a relationship. So it's the first and most essential thing, that even when it gets like this, we still have a relationship. And some of the tests that we can use is that it's going to be all about them, and they want you to understand their feelings, they want you to share their fears, so they're looking for validation. Remember when we were listening to Marcus, he talked about validation. Well, this is where validation happens. I want you to validate what I'm feeling and how big it is. It doesn't mean agreement, unless your cultural background is German. Yeah, well, it turns out that certain cultures just won't accept validation without agreement, because they're the I am right cultures. The highest value in Northern European, particular German culture, is that you are right about everything. So it's not enough that you validate that that's what's going on. You have to assert that I am right. But that's a cultural tangle in their left brain that has to be untangled separately. But I can't help but comment about it at this point, so because you'll run into it somewhere along the line. Now there's a difference between fear at level 3 and what we're calling fear or terror at level 2. In other words, if my wife has that reaction to flying in turbulence, and I validate for her, oh, that turbulence is really scaring you, it does absolutely zippo for level 2 fear. I mean, the words are causing our confusion here, because you really ought to have a different word for it. It's like, validating that's useless to me. But this other fear, like this fear that we feel at this level, that there's some threat coming my way, that this big guy breaking into our house isn't good for you. That fear, to have it validated, makes me feel better. Now, if we want to just really go off the map, there is also a complete set of these feelings that are left hemisphere feelings, not right hemisphere feelings. The difference being the right hemisphere feeling is my initial and first reaction before I even think. And so, all right, so when I grew up, dogs were a dangerous thing. Dogs were brought to South America by the conquistadors and used as war animals to run down the Indians and kill them. So when dogs went after you, it was with the objective of killing you, and a lot of them were rabid. So I watched lots of rabid dogs run down the street, and you just don't want a rabid dog running after you, and you don't want a conquistador dog running after you. Dogs are just flat. Level 2 has no opinion. Scary. That's a bad and scary animal. You do not want those around. So my wife, who grew up with little puppies and stuff like that, says to me, well, let's get a dog. That's not going to go anywhere with level 2, right? It has its opinion. It's not going to be changed. And no matter how many times you tell me they're fluffy and warm and all the rest of that, my level 2 isn't going to change its opinion about the whole thing. So you can see which level are we dealing with. Now, if it was a level 3 fear, now, I don't know about this dog. We go in to visit somebody new with a dog, and the dog's hair on its back sort of stands up and it starts to growl. I would look at the owner and go, is this dangerous? Right? And they'd say, yeah, you know what? Let me take this dog out back and we'll talk. I'm going like, oh yeah, that's good. Thank you very much. Now we're connecting, right? This is a completely different response to the same kind of potential fear stimuli. Or they might go, it's a Rhodesian Ridgeback. His hair is always up like that. And he just gets noisy. So sit down, lay down. He goes, lays down, and we're like, all right. That's what I need to know right there. This is not relational experience. So you want to look at the difference between these two kinds of fear. On the left side, however, fears are always subject to a thought coming first. So if with the dog, the sort of growling, and someone looked at me and says, does the dog kind of scare you? I'd say, yeah, I always get nervous when dogs growl at me. I'd feel understood, right? On the left side, I have a thought, I'm really stupid to be scared of dogs. So if you validate that and say, you know what, you're really stupid to be afraid of dogs, it doesn't make me feel any better. Now validation does me absolutely no good. I'm going like, well, thanks a lot. So the very interesting thing, on left-sided feelings, if you validate them, it makes it worse. I'm feeling like I'm a shameful person, I'm worthless, and no one wants me. You know what? That's exactly right. You couldn't have put it better. I'm not real happy to get validated, right? But if you say, wow, when that happened, you felt really embarrassed, you're really ashamed. Like, yeah, that's right, that's what I'm fighting with. I feel understood. You see the difference between the two sides? So people often get confused about that, especially on the issue of shame. Well, should you validate shame or not? It depends on whether it's a natural reaction to an experience, so that you say, well, when you pass gas, you feel kind of embarrassed with other people, don't you? So yeah, okay, I feel validated, I feel understood. If you were to say something on the other side, you're shameful, you're just the kind of person that no one likes, I'm not going to feel validated and understood. So again, look at any of those issues and you'll find a left-sided equivalent to it. If I'm angry based on thoughts I have about you, validating that whole thing is not going to make it better. If I'm angry over here because something happened that I really need to have stopped or taken care of, I will feel better if you validate, like, that really kind of made you mad, didn't it? Like, for instance, when they said, you're a therapist and you should get over that. That made my friend mad. I validated, I said, yeah, it really made you mad when they said that to you, didn't you? And I'm like, yeah. So we now understand each other. You see the difference kind of there? So I just wanted to let you sketch that out so you knew it was out there, and there's these different levels of what we're doing. So let's see if we can get through level 4. Pain, and have I got the right screen up there now? All right. So level 4 pain, this is our group identity center. If you're under 12, it's your individual identity center, but if you're over 12, it's your group identity center. And the best way to describe it is that I feel inadequate. I don't know who to be right now. So you remember the son with the newly sprouted pubic hair? When he came in to do that, my feeling I'm going to describe as inadequate. I don't know how to handle this or how to be right now. It isn't that, it's not attachment pain. It's not my reaction to turbulence. It's not even that I don't know what feeling I'm having right now or that I'm not sharing it. I'm really connected with him and everyone around. I just have drawn a blank. It's an uncomfortable blank, you notice? But there's no real good word for that kind of uncomfortable blank. I mean, inadequate isn't quite right word either, is it? It's just I feel that something's missing right now that'd be really helpful if I had it. So I'm looking for something that really would be just, and I haven't got the whatever it is to do right now. And it's actually a very common experience if we look around. How often do we walk into a room, into a situation, into something going on with someone else's life, and we feel like this is an important moment, and I should somehow, something, but what? It really, you experience my early experience of trying to be a father was like 98% walking in there like, okay, that's a baby. I know that's my baby, and I'm supposed to do something, but what on earth do you do with babies? And I ran through my list of what fathers are for, and so that you punish them if they go wrong, You provide for them so they got something to eat, and you support their mother. Bound to be something else. None of that tells me what to do with baby. Right? That's actually kind of pretty much it. That was what populated my dad identity segment, right? Like, okay, this is going to be rough, because I've got lots of blanks, and I really, really, really felt like I wanted to be a good dad. If I only had a foggy what that might look like. So it wasn't that I didn't care. It wasn't that but how would you describe that pain? It's an intense that is one of the more intense ones in my entire life, of a sense that something ought to be here that isn't here. And if it were, and if I knew what it was, it'd probably be about as meaningful as anything I know. But there actually is nothing there. I have no idea what you put in this spot. But if anyone could show me, right? They could tell me, they could describe it, they could tell a story. An example is what I'm looking for. Could you give me an example of what it is someone does right now? Because if it was a good example, I'm on it. Probably only have to tell me once, and I'll practice it and I'll get better at it, because I'm on this one, And if I saw 2 or 3 different examples, that'd be even better. And you're familiar with this dynamic? Someone's actually may have even come to you looking for an example, like how would it look? What would it be like? What would it be like to be a Christian right now? And in fact, that's rare to be asked, right? But it shouldn't be rare, because we should, all of us, be looking at and going, we haven't got a lot of good examples of how life is lived. So I'm looking for a better example, one that I can look at and go, oh, I do hope God got that one on tape, because I want to see the playback. So the symptom, we would call it, is immaturity. That is, I haven't developed a self that knows what to do with this. And I need a self that can deal with this right now, but I haven't got one yet. So we call that immaturity. And that doesn't, again, immaturity has that flavor or ring to it, right? You're sort of bad if you have got immaturity. So we don't want to talk about it, like, oh yeah, I'm feeling immature right now. That doesn't quite do justice to what I want. I need more self than what I have for right now. But it's actually, that is what immaturity is we're missing what we need. And what I need as a skill is, how do I act like myself and my people right now? So that my people can look at me and go, that's my kind of person right there. God can look at me and go, that's my kind of child right there. That's, my wife and children can go, that's my dad right there doing that. This is what we want as a sense for this kind of developed identity. And basically, we get to the point where we become sort of hopeless that we can talk about it, find it, or locate it anywhere. And so most people have at some point given up the search. So one of the things we have to do is inspire people once again to begin the search and say, I'm searching, I'm learning, here's what I'm learning, let me share with you. So again, my story about this is, I was trying to figure out, and this is on anger, which you'd think would be at level 3, right? But it wasn't a problem that I felt like no one would understand I was angry. They knew I was angry, right? I knew how to communicate anger. I'd gotten enough therapy classes to have anger on my face and in my voice tone and communicate it adequately and strongly and be present and let you know how really mad I was. And so I could effectively let you know, like, let's share this experience together. Look in my eyes. I can tell how pissed I am right now. In and out of the garbage can with Fritz Perls, anyone? Anyone go back far enough for that? Oh yeah. So Fritz Perls, he helped me out all with expressing all that. It didn't help me a bit at level 4, because I'm thinking, if I'm being angry the way God wants, I want it on tape. I want God playing this back, and I want everyone going, like, you really got to meet my dad when he's mad, because there's, this is good stuff. I want you to learn from him how this is going to happen, because you've never seen it like this before. It's like, so I'm trying to figure out, how do you learn that? Who are my people? I couldn't find any people. All my people were Fritz Perls people. They never got better than Fritz at letting you know how mad they were. And getting batakas and beating the snot out of something didn't do, and tearing up phone books didn't do. And I mean, there's all these things I tried, and none of them felt like, well, this is a really good expression of myself. I've gone through 7 phone books now, so what? Pillows, none of that. So I went to the grocery store, where the clerks were bored. And as I was going through the grocery line, I said to them, now, hey, how do you like to express anger? What do you really find, really satisfying way of expressing anger? And they'd look at me like, oh, well, there's an interesting topic no one's brought up with me today. And they would share their idea. Inevitably very bad. But the interesting thing was that at least they would talk with me about it. And then I would walk out going, I wonder why does that strike me as a very bad idea? And in that dialogue of why I wouldn't want to do what they just told me, I began to think of what might be better than what they had just come up with. And actually most of what I figured out about how to express myself by anger, I learned from the clerks. But by learning what they would do and then looking it over and thinking, well, why wouldn't that be satisfying? Because no one else wanted to talk with me about it. The church people didn't want to talk with me about it. I mean, there was no place to go and discover how would my people like to do that. So I picked the ones that were doing it pretty badly, but at least we were a kind of people, me and the grocery store clerks, that could talk about this. It was the only context, It was relational, it was interesting. They're fascinating by my answer, and I'm fascinated by their answer, although it was bad. So trying to learn how to act like ourselves after we know that we have the feeling and we've shared it with somebody else is a whole different step than just sharing the feeling. So now we know we're angry, we can share it, we're both as mad, that's great. Blank, right? My mother always used to just send me to my room until I could behave myself. So most of you have heard this story before. So when I got married, the first time I got married, angry at my wife, I thought, I'll go to my room till I can behave myself. Then it occurred to me she had the same room. And so I thought, well, that won't work. Maybe I guess I'll have to go outside, which is always the other alternative as a child. If you can't, things aren't going well in the house, you go outside. So I started marching outside, and she said, well, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going outside. And she said, well, when are you coming back? And the thought that ran through my head was, when I can behave myself. And I thought, I don't think I want to say that. But other than that, it was a blank. And she was not very satisfied with this way of dealing with it. It was just not going to work with her, right? But I had again, there was this complete blank of what do you do to act like yourself with your people when you're feeling these things, when these things are going on, that's actually going to make everybody proud and be a good way of expressing this so that at the end we have a better relationship with each other. And I'm here to tell you that if you even get people as bad as the clerks to talk with you about it, your community will figure it out. If only you talk together about it, right? So you don't need some great, lecture to come in from outside to say, here's all the great ways to do it. You can figure it out together by just reviewing what you did. If you want to do it as your family, go back after every time you've been angry and go like, wow, did we act like ourselves that way? Which ways can we improve it, and which ways can we be proud of this time? If you have that discussion, you will get better at getting closer to what's going on. And if you're willing to say, let's invite Jesus' presence in here so we be as creative as possible about that, because I know he was there watching us, and let's see what he has to say about us, you'll have another ingredient that's very, very powerful and that I didn't even use in those early days to figure out how to act like yourself, because actually Jesus has some experience and knowing how to act like himself when angry. So level 4 pain, you always realize that I'm having an effect on you as well. And it continues to minimize the person's own negative impact. So if you're up at level 4, you realize this experience I'm having isn't just about my feelings, but you are here too. And the interesting thing is level 4 is the first level that really updates itself in real time. So it can say right at this 1/6 of a second, we're doing pretty well. This 1/6 of the second, we're not doing very well. We're not satisfying ourselves. Let's improve. And so you stay engaged and you can learn and you can interact with each other up at level 4. And when that's happening, I always realize that I'm part of this. The other way to say it is that when level 4 is off, I never recognize that I'm a part of what's happening. It's always you are a part of what's happening, I'm not a part of what's happening. So you often hear, again in arguments, people saying, well, you need to own your part of it. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily operating at this level, but it's something in us recognizes that two people are creating what we're doing here, and we have to be involved in the effect we're having on the others as well as how well we're expressing ourselves, or we're just not a people. I'm just a piston doing whatever. I'm just a single actor. A people always have both sides of it. So when I am done, I want the effect of this on you to be as good as the effect was on me. I want you to come out of this feeling as good about how this went as I am. I want to come out of it feeling like I'm really proud of who you were as a person right now, and you're really proud of who I am as a person right now. You see how very rarely that actually gets pulled up on the scanner as anyone's way of looking at things, which probably accounts for how our success rate has gone. So
it's hard.
It's hard, but if you're feeling someone has validated you and understood and said how big it is for you, it's a whole lot less hard. And a moment on voluntarism before we go any farther. The voluntarism is the thing that grew out of Descartes, I think, therefore I am, that said that what I think and what I choose are the most important things about me. Under voluntarism, a medieval psychology was kind of converted into theology that every Western theology includes, and that is the only part of you that can be saved is your will. And not by itself, but with God's Spirit's help, you can actually make the choice to follow God. Everything else about you is too fallen to be saved. And of course, what would be the big enemy of your will? Your emotions. So the emotions cannot be saved. They're always the thing that leads you to hell. And all you can do is override them with your will, which could be saved. But your emotions are hopelessly fallen, and that's the basis of all the Western theologies. So every time they tell you got an emotion, you're automatically bad, you're automatically fallen, and the one thing you want to do is be able to choose and overcome to overrule whatever you're feeling. That would be the Christian thing to do. Well, if what you're trying to do is override or overrule or overchoose something that's happening before you consciously have a choice to choose it, which is how these things emerge, then you're really done in no matter how. You'll never learn how to act like yourself, other than my people will always condemn us for feeling this way. And so the best I can do is to condemn myself and condemn you for feeling that way, which is highly unproductive to a good outcome of relationships, you see. So our very theological basis of what it means to be saved has limited our choices of intervention. If all of these emotions were there to help us realize something's going wrong in my relationship, and what we need to do is restore the relationship so that the feelings will no longer, the alarms will not be on anymore. Then we would teach each other better ways to do this relationally. And yes, on the left side, there are a lot of emotions that can be created on the left side based on false beliefs. And we ought to clean those up, but that's not the whole crew, is it? Those are all the things that if I said to you and validated, you wouldn't like them. They don't bring you peace, they don't bring you shalom, they just make you feel like, if that's true, I hate my life. That's the stuff that needs clearing out. So again, we need both sides of the brain, right? As we're doing this. So back to level 5, and I've got 7 minutes to do this. And fortunately, level 5 is the easiest of them. So this level of pain, the best way to do it is to say we're confused. And it always resolves with more information. It always resolves with more information if we get the right information. So if I don't know how to handle my crisis and I need to know how much money I have in the bank, and all I need is to know how much money I've got, you give me the information, I'm no longer confused. Oh, that's what I needed to know. Thank you very much. So you don't need to get in touch with your inner person or anything like that or express your emotions. You just need to know something you don't know right now. And if someone would please tell me, I would be like, that's all I needed to know, and I'd be done. So this is the easiest level to intervene. So more information will help us. Often the symptom is internal conflict. So when I don't know what's going on, what I actually need to know, I fight with myself about what might be the right solution or the right way out of this. I'm conflicted inside, well, I could do this, but would that be right? Or should I invest in long-term bonds or short-term bonds? And is the market going to crash, or is the market going to go bullish on me? And if I knew, I wouldn't actually be conflicted inside. I would just be like, okay, that's done. It'd be nice if Jesus just gave you a report on how the market's going to go for the next 2 years and said, now, based on this information, please make a choice. You'd go like, I think I'm in. I don't know conflict. I got the information I want. Unfortunately, not available. So, the defense is to blame, explain, and accuse and justify. So, if I don't have the information and that's all I need, what I'll typically do is get into those verbal sparrings of explaining myself too much, blaming, accusing, and justifying. The skill that needed is basically better. This is the one place in which education actually is helpful. Now, you might look back on this on today after the fog clears, and I know I create brain fog as I'm running through all of this, and think to yourself, oh, now I understand better what the brain is doing or what's happening in front of me, and you have the knowledge with which to sort things out. You see, so you'll look at things that previously puzzled you, and you go like, it doesn't puzzle me anymore. I'm not conflicted. It's not like I don't know what to do. It's like I now know this is a level 3 problem, and I know it's going to be corrected by having proper empathy and validating people, and I have to validate both what they're feeling and how big it is. That's all we need to do. And I may not be good at that, but now the fog is gone. You see, this has been resolved by knowledge, which is why we have the whole lecture here, to give you this knowledge base. And for some reasons, that's very, very useful. Diagnostic indicator, I'm focused on what other people think or rules. It probably means that I'm stuck at level 5. So when I don't know how to deal with other people, I spend my time trying to figure them out. So I'm focused on what are they doing, what do they want, or trying to get them to follow rules. So, you know, you're the counselor, you're supposed to do this. You're the husband, you're supposed to do that. You're the rules. Since I don't understand you, I just need you to do what you're supposed to do, and here's the rules you're supposed to follow. By the way, that's the way most licensing boards are for therapists. They're totally focused on following the rules. You follow the rules just right. And as a doctor mentioned to me earlier today, the way the rules are currently set up, you're always in violation of at least one. Which should cause no anxiety whatsoever, since these enforcers will understand you and your motives, right? No, they won't. They are, you know, this is where their limited function is. And so that's a diagnostic indicator that people simply don't understand enough of what's going on, because they're just stuck with the rules. And you notice that's where we put most of our Christianity. We run Christianity this way. And so most people are likely in level 5 pain. That is, they're confused by what it means to be a Christian and what you're supposed to do to please God and how do you hear God. And anything you bring up that's really of value to them, you'll dig up confusion with them, because what they're hearing from this person and that person doesn't agree, and what they're understanding when they read the Bible doesn't make sense to, I mean, all these bits of information that are not fitting together. And it's resolved by good communication. This is the only level of the brain at which, if you communicate very well, and I know what you need to know and I can tell you, then you will feel better and the problem's gone. And way too often we try to put everything that we've talked about up until this point into this category. If I just communicate with you clearly enough, tell you exactly what it is that God wants and thinks, and all your problems should be resolved and it should be gone, and you should be able to handle all the problems 1 through 4, which actually won't resolve that way. But it's the way a lot of the so-called biblical counseling actually tries to run the world. And then if it doesn't work, it defaults into you're lacking something in your spiritual life. So you're just not spiritual enough for this. So information and understanding will solve the problem without the person needing to be involved. So here's the only level at which I don't need to have a personal involvement with somebody. If I need the information of my bank account, I don't need someone to be involved in me and deeply care about me and want to share my life with me. Just tell me how much is in the bank. Then I'm ready to just walk on off. So it's the one level that can be handled non-relationally with no harm whatsoever. It doesn't mean we don't need the relationship. It just means we need no relationship at all. We just need someone to understand what I was asking in order for this to be resolved. You ever been frustrated with somebody who you're trying to ask them a real simple question, just tell me this, and they're wandering off about all that other stuff, and I don't need any of that. It's just, this information and we're done. That's, now you know you're at level 5, and if they wander off long enough, you'll develop the other problems just to spoil your day.